ISD reporting services is in Paris, France for the UN climate change talks, reporting on side events. On Monday, 30th November, the Nordic Council of Ministers, the Nordic Development Fund (NDF), and the Nordic Environment Finance Corporation (NEFCO) held a side event entitled Sustainable Transformations, featuring experiences of Nordic countries in supporting developing countries access climate financing.
And the Nordic countries have always had a strong commitment to cooperation. But for any cooperation to be successful, you need commitment at many levels, and to be successful, you need to have a good anchorage and ownership also in the host countries, in the countries that you cooperate with. Otherwise, it will not work. So, for this particular cooperation, I believe that it's become well-rooted in both our countries and in the cooperating countries in Peru and Vietnam. The ownership is there.
Martina Joghan highlighted ongoing Nordic support for nationally driven actions to reduce emissions, also commonly known as NAMAs.
We want to be sensitive to what's happening in climate change and in a way take on new issues that are emerging in the climate framework.
Speaking on transformation to low-carbon sustainable development, Sumir Sharma of UNEP DTU Partnerships said NAMAs are key to achieving sustainable development.
Empty number of reports and various talks which say that we need to be moving towards taking transformational steps in addressing climate change. And this has to be in the context of developing countries linked to what is the sustainable development needs in these countries, so that these needs can be met while we are moving towards addressing comprehensively the issues of GHG emission as well as adaptation, which is becoming very important.
Examples of Nordic support for the most promising options to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions used in the sector rather than project approach were also presented.
My presentation today, we have named Carbon Finance Readiness and Assessments for Cement Sector in Vietnam.
Ha Danson, Technical Director NIRAS, elaborated on why this NAMA is one of the most ambitious in the world.
If we look at both as the financial needs and also the benefit come out from the emissions reduction, then the benefit from the emission reduction can be between 2 million ton of carbon dioxide equivalent up to 9 million ton of carbon dioxide, and it's huge. In fact, when we sum up everything, then it could reach between 130 to 150 million ton of carbon dioxide up to 2030 for Vietnam. And if you compare with the target for the emission reduction by Vietnam itself under the INDC, then it's also contribute a lot.
Alberto Galanti discussed Nordic countries' support in upscaling mitigation actions in Peru's solid waste sector.
As of many developing countries, the issue in Peru is that the emissions arising from the waste sector have increased largely over the last decade. And according to the business as usual scenarios that the government has presented in the INDC, they are also expected to increase. Now, the good news is that the Peruvian government is really committed to implement policy instruments at the national level, this on the one hand, and on the other hand, that there are available technologies so that the emissions can be reduced below the baseline scenario. So those technologies are ready to be used. There is the commitment of the government, and now there is only lacking some international support. And I'm sure that Peru will manage to implement this very ambitious NAMA.
Ash Sharma, NEFCO's special advisor on climate, summarized the key messages drawn from the event.
This is a journey. Working with a NAMA, preparing a NAMA is a long-term activity. And we've learnt that, for example, with the activities in both Peru and Vietnam. We're looking at climate programs which involve, for example, policy reforms, regulatory changes, ways of, for example, finding or improving the investment climate. We found that, for example, the work with inventories and baselines and so-called monitoring, reporting and verification, all very important things.
Stay tuned for more from ISD reporting services on side events.